Hello and welcome to Nugent's podcast. Today we're going to talk about trauma-informed care, sexual exploitation and criminal exploitation. So I'd like to welcome our two guests from today, Jacob Giddins, who is the Deputy Manager of Marydale Lodge, and Megan Foster, who is the Head of Specialist Children and the Registered Manager of Marydale Lodge. Hello both.
Hi.
So do you want to just tell us about your journey with Marydale and what role you hold?
Yeah, of course. So I am the registered manager of Marydale. So I'm responsible for ensuring just the oversight, the general running of the home, and I entrust that in Jacob, one of my deputy managers.
Yeah, so I've been with Nugent now for just a little over 5 weeks.
5 weeks and made a podcast.
What can I say? Yes, please. So before joining Nugent and coming to work at Marydale Lodge, I'd worked in Lancashire Constabulary as a police community support officer, and I'd done that for around 4, getting on 5 years. And sort of throughout that time, I'd spent a lot of my policing career working with children on the periphery of the criminal justice system, spent a lot of time working with young people who go missing from home, and ended up being part of an award-winning boxing project that was used as an antisocial behaviour diversion tool, which won some awards. So that sort of drove me to want to work with those types of young people, and here I am.
Here you are.
Here I am.
So just talk to us about, and either one of you or both of you, talk to us about what trauma-informed care is.
Yeah. So trauma-informed care is just an agreed way of working, and it's embedded in all our policies, procedures, and all our expectations of staff. So the very basic of it is just providing like a secure, stable, like nurturing environment where children can just establish all the physical, psychological, like health needs that they have, and just develop from there.
For listeners who may not know, can you share how Nugent supports children and young people who've experienced exploitation or trauma?
Yeah. Should I go?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we primarily like provide safe and consistent accommodation for young people, and then it's in our way of working that we implement trauma-informed care. So it's seeing a child for them and not just the risk behaviours that they present with, for example, understanding why those behaviours are there, and then how are we going to change them. So that's what we do as a home, particularly in like Marydale and our children's services, but then we also have to link with our community services and things like that, because there's a lot of connections between socio-economic backgrounds and poverty alleviation work that we do that tie together to make sure that every area of a child's needs are met through various different Nugent support systems.
So for our viewers, what is CSE?
So CSE is criminal sexual exploitation, or there's also CCE, which is child criminal exploitation. So that is where an individual or an organised crime group, more often than not, will exploit a young person in order to achieve, whether it be the facilitation of selling drugs, more often than not, which is county lines and things like that, or alternatively it will be to exploit that young person for sexual goals and the ends to use them for whether it's personal gratification or whether it's part of a wider sphere of organised crime.
How prevalent is that in our society?
I think from my experience, having worked in the community before joining Nugent, it's incredibly prevalent where you wouldn't necessarily expect it. In fact, just before we've come onto the podcast, we were talking about how children who are exploited are not necessarily the children that you would look at and think would be the young people who are exploited. It's not just children who are stereotypically from deprived backgrounds where there's socioeconomic challenges, where there's challenges in the family unit at home, where there's the stereotypical no positive male role model. It's so much broader than that any young person can be exploited. And these groups or individuals will prey on any young person or individual that falls within the remit that they can exploit them. So whether that is providing gifts, so trainers, clothing, cash, whether it's a sense of identity or belonging, or whether it's providing that attention that they might not be getting at home. And that can be because mums and dads are working professionals and can't provide that love, care and attention. And it shows itself in just about every walk of life that I've come into contact with.
Anything you want to add to that, Megan?
Yeah, no, I think what Jacob's covered there is it what we've seen a full shift in childcare, like in our residential services where it isn't that stereotypical. I think even the use of technology now and social media platforms has meant everybody is subject to it, if that makes sense. It's not just someone on an estate, it's a bit dodgy. It's everywhere. You can literally type one word into Snapchat and it's there.
What sort of signs would you see of someone who is exploited? I suppose the difference for the criminal to the sexually, but what sort of signs would you see?
So criminal, like Jacob touched upon, is a bit like children might come on with new trainers or new phones, items that they wouldn't previously have or, aren't in their remit to purchase themselves, for example. They might actually start to withdraw from adults they previously trusted or had a good relationship with. You might see shifts in dynamics of peer groups or reluctancy to engage in education, or might have a lot of anxiety around events, might they? Like, when you know a child and when you know the daily routines, even though you might not be able to put it down, when there's a change, you can just sense something's wrong, and that gut feeling is usually right.
So as, to raise awareness on this podcast, as members of the community or parents, recognising those signs, what approach would we take with those young people to understand what might be happening?
I think it's essential that it's not coming from a place of judgment or punishment, but rather to understand why this might have happened, because you don't actually know yet. You're just suspecting things. That being open and honest and just saying, I do have this concern, and why you might have the concern, and if they're able to open up to, or if you could seek support from somebody else to help facilitate that, because it isn't an easy conversation to have. And I think especially with the children that we've supported, it's not about us saying that families have got it wrong or they're not parenting well enough or anything like that. Some of the outside influence is just so loud. It's hard to navigate.
And it's hard, isn't it? If people want the new trainers, the new clothing, it's really difficult for families to be able to
keep up
with that and the expense of that. So, it makes them easier to be targeted as well, because it is so difficult to peer pressure, fitting in at school, the amount of mufti days, where people can wear their own clothes, what all that does in terms of peer group pressure. And social media it
exacerbates it, because I remember being in school and then people saying like, oh, you weren't allowed Nike trainers or you weren't allowed design trainers. I thought, you're just being tight, like not letting us do anything. But now I understand why, because those children who can't afford such luxuries are then singled out or can see vulnerabilities or run the risk of bullying just because of that. Mm-hmm. So those things aren't there to penalise people. It's to make everything more a level playing field, isn't it?
So, go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think it's around the awareness, because it must be so hard now. Now, I don't have children myself, but to parent in a really digital age where all the young people and children now are on social media, is that if you're someone who's seeking to exploit children, you have access to every platform that these young people are on. You can place yourself in their sort of line of sight, in the sense that, you look at platforms like Snapchat, which have live maps where anybody is, stories. And I think it's really, really difficult to be able to combat that in a digital age without constantly going through a young person's phone, because parents haven't got time for that, and we're not going to do that. But at the same time, I think for me, it's about that awareness of looking for those signs. It's recognising that anybody can be exploited. And like Megan said, is having those conversations with children or young people, whether that's because you're a professional who works with them or whether it's mums and dads. It's that awareness that anybody can be exploited.
Yeah, and I think, technology is moving at such a pace. It's really difficult for adults to know what's the new app, how to get in, how to let, people get round these things all the time. I find it a bit of a minefield in my 50s to be able to navigate keeping up with social media and, just using social media myself, let alone supporting young people to use social media safely.
Yeah.
There is just on that, there is a lot of support that I don't think just people in the community realise, that like every local authority has like a safeguarding hub that will very often every month put out safeguarding tips, tricks, people, contacts, things like that anyone in the public can access. But I don't think unless you then need it, you don't think about it, if that makes sense. So anyone going to the local council or citizens advice for their local council can provide you that information as
That's
well.
useful to know because, you don't look until you've got a suspicion or a concern that you think somebody needs some support.
Yeah.
So how does trauma impact the way children respond to situations, relationships, or authority figures?
I feel like it almost impacts everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Like, some trauma, for example, might feel like a child. We have a model in Marydale which is threat, drive, and soothe, and a lot of time a trauma that a child's experience can result in always going into threat. So that might be always being presenting as physically aggressive, because the view is, I'll stop you from ever hurting me. I'll get the first move in, so then it's on my terms, if that makes sense. And then a lot of the time where children get involved with authoritative figures, it could be like the police, for example, or care workers or anything like that, where they feel like they're going to be up against something. So they really build that wall and try and prevent that consistent care because they're just not used to it. So trying to relearn exactly how people around you are meant to support you is so confusing. We often see barriers first, which we have to chip away at with consistency and security, and then they realise we're not going anywhere. We're not just going to repeat everything that's happened to you previously. I feel like it just behavioural, emotional, psychological, doesn't it?
It can present in a whole host of ways. In fact, we discussed off air an example of where one of the other deputy managers was engaging with a young person in our care at the moment, and he'd had some difficult news, shall we say, that his time with us is being extended, which I dare say that most people, don't want to be in that environment if they are. And for him, that was really, really difficult to process, that he couldn't go back and live with family because of the risks, which is ultimately why he's come into our care at Marydale. And the way that he was presenting at the time was really, really aggressive. He was shouting. He was unable to sort of take any direction from staff. He was just so highly strung in the moment that nobody could sort of reason with him. And that's that threat that Megan talks about, is that before any of you can talk to me, is that I don't want to hear it. And this young person, so coming back to trauma-informed care, what I witnessed was one of the deputy managers just build a bridge with him, and it was just by acknowledging the way he felt. And this young person, so let's say, so his time with us has been extended because of something that's gone on in the home environment, and he was adamant that something that had been put in a report wasn't factual and that it misrepresented his circumstances. And what Alex did, I'm sure she won't mind naming it, what Alex did really, really well was she just sat in front of him in the lounge and just said, okay, I believe you. And all of a sudden, this young man who's so highly strung, doesn't know where to place his aggression, he just goes, what do you mean? And you can just see the cogs whirring. He just goes, okay, what do you mean, okay? And she goes, I believe you. And all Alex has done there is acknowledge how he felt, acknowledged his frustrations, heard and understood him. And that, for me, is what it looks like in practice, is that it's acknowledging and understanding. It's not just, don't do that, you can't do this. It's understanding the why, what drives that behaviour. Why is he presenting in that way? And it's because he'd had some bad news. And yet
anybody would behave, in that way. Yeah. So given how complex Marydale Lodge is and the trauma that young people have encountered, what trained support do you have to give staff to enable them to have that toolkit to be able to manage these situations?
Yeah, we invest a lot in the training that the staff get, both so they're aware of the kind of behaviours that may be displayed, but also so they can understand the why and get to the root cause, and then also make sure that they're psychologically safe as well, don't we? So we have like a a strong focus on safeguarding and practices. We have a lot of disclosures from children about historic abuse, for example. So how staff manage that, whether it be reporting, who they talk to and things like that, but then also how they manage that themselves, because it's hard to hear. We do a lot of training about attachment disorders, adverse childhood experiences, and even bereavement, because a lot of our young people have experienced extreme loss in various different forms, and what grief can look like to a child. It's really important to understand. And then obviously we have behaviour management training and protecting rights in a caring environment, which talks about all the primary strategies we need to use to support children, and then should they need to be supported, what other techniques we can use and things like that. So
can you give us an example of what a primary strategy would be?
Yeah, so primary strategy, how we map it out is like a traffic light system, and green is your primary, and green is I'm good to go, I'm absolutely fine, and this is how I present when I'm fine. So in your primary strategies, that would be the consistent day-to-day care that you provide, probably without even realising it, but it's a homely environment for the kids. Keep things ticking. We use humour. We have activities for the young people to do, just something to keep us engaged, but a baseline, if that makes sense. We then move on to our amber section, which might be this young person's heard a little bit of bad news. He's not reacted to it yet, but you can tell the news has just sunk in. So what would we do in that situation? So that might look like diversion, distraction, going out on activities. We might suggest us spending some time in the activity room instead, or watching a film with staff just to try and bring those emotions back down. Or it might actually be, we'll go outside and run around for half an hour because I need to get this energy out, if that makes sense. And then we have a more red section, which is when a young person is dysregulated and cannot manage it themselves at that time, can't take direction from staff, or the other strategies haven't been useful. It's what staff need to do in order to support the young person. And then we have blue, which is reflection. So after whatever stage we've got to, we should always learn what that period has meant for that child, what was successful, what wasn't, why was it not successful, and what did our actions mean to the kids. So that blue section is really important as well.
So would the blue section come after the green, the yellow, the amber, and the red?
Yeah.
And then would the young person be part of that?
Yeah. So it's essential, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We do, even if we get to red, we do debriefs and things like that, but we do like weekly check-ins and things like that, so we find out what's gone well for the kids, and it's just in our documentation of how we've saw that Jacob was in a really good mood today and we'd done this, and so we continue to learn with the kids about, we used humour and we was actually able to get back engaging in English or something like that. We're constantly learning.
Constantly being adapted, the system, the traffic light system.
Yeah.
And so a young person might say humour didn't work actually.
Yeah.
Hit you with funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which we get quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I suppose, is that tailored to each individual child? Because that must be difficult, mustn't it, as a member of staff, knowing, because you could have up to 12 children at any one time.
Yeah.
What works for one person doesn't work for another.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes when we have a new person who comes to stay with us at Marydale, it does take us that bit of time to get to work out what makes them tick, what motivates them, what are their trigger points. So what are the things that upset them, what's going to make them withdraw from engagement. And I think just on the whole point of reflection, somewhat coming at it with a fresh pair of eyes, because I'm still relatively new and I've come from outside of Nugent, there's a really, really positive, reflective culture at Marydale, in that after every single incident, staff will take part in a debrief where we'll talk about what worked, what didn't, what frustrated us. Is there something that, for example, if me and Megan have been involved in an incident, is there something Megan did that perhaps irritated me or that I felt was wrong, and vice versa? And I think that culture is really, really strong, in the sense that we're constantly learning about the young people. We're constantly learning, what are we good at as staff? Because we've all got our strengths and things that we're good at. And I think that culture just helps us with every single young person that we work with get to where we need to be with them, because we're constantly thinking about, what can we do differently? What works? Do we need to change this? Okay, that worked last week, but not this week. And it's just that constant learning.
Yeah.
We're talking about what works for young people. How do we make sure we understand each other in terms of our colleagues and what works? What, does humour work with Megan? Or, how do we make sure? Because we won't have a traffic light system, I don't assume, for staff.
Up here.
Yeah. So is it about just those discussions?
Yeah, I think it's facilitated through those reflective practices after an incident. Is like, say, when you're in the hub, which we call the staff office, after an incident, and you have a really honest, really open conversation. And I think it's a really, really positive thing that if there have been things that have frustrated that member of staff, if there's things that have gone wrong, it's that environment where you can put it all out. You can get it out there in the open. You can address it. And I think that it builds a really, really strong culture, because actually, if I've done something wrong that's wound Meg up in an incident, and we have that conversation, is that you are then conscious of what you can do to improve as well. So it's not all just about other people. It helps you get better as a member of staff. And personally, in my own time since joining Marydale, I've been part of those discussions and improved the way I interact with colleagues and young people. And it's really, really important to just that continual learning cycle.
Yeah, I think through them sections of like debriefs as well, if we're expecting the children to have that level of reflection or willingness to change, we have to do that as well. That's role modeling. So if people aren't willing to be open or receive that input from whether it be leaders, peers, or anything like that, you cannot expect it from the young people. But when I do some of the training about adverse childhood experiences, I get everyone in the room and everyone's got a pen and a piece of paper, and I said, write down your deepest, darkest secret ever. Write it on your piece of paper, and you can see everyone's like the panic is setting in. I'm like, come on, write it, and I'm going to read them all out in a minute. Write it, and you see some people are hesitant or looking around like, what, are you actually going to do it? And people start writing, or they might not, and things like that. And then I said, I'm not going to read them out, but who truthfully wrote down their deepest, darkest secret? And it's seldom anyone ever will. But that's exactly what we expect our young people to do. Come in and tell
you everything straight away.
Yeah.
Just met you.
Yeah, but throughout the whole journey, it's not that easy to just come and tell people, this is how much I'm struggling and this is what I need help with. So we can't expect the world from them if we can't give a little bit to each other as well. Do you know what I mean? So
obviously, working in such a challenging environment, how do we make sure staff's well-being is considered? And obviously you talked about the reflection piece, but I'm sure there is more than just the reflection piece in terms of staff well-being.
Yeah, so a lot of it is coming from understanding the behaviour anyway. So, for example, if there's been an assault or sexual assault towards staff or anything like that, it's really hard to comprehend why that might have happened or things like that. So we have a health team in our building that offer clinical supervisions as well, and we have formulations of the children to understand why these behaviours might present, that they're not a personal attack or target or things like that, and how we resolve that for our staff as well. And wellbeing's a really big focus at Marydale. We need to ensure the team are psychologically safe. If we're not, how we're going to provide that appropriate care to the staff. So even just, we've got a new staff base, haven't we, where we've got a wall full of positive quotes that staff have said about one another. We have a staff of the month. We've got like a little break room where we fill the fridge with like pop and crisp and stuff, and sometimes you just need a biscuit. And just being mindful that we support the staff in every aspect, not just this needs doing, that needs doing. We care about them as well.
Because I assume you can be on shift. We spend a lot of time in work, don't we? But in a challenging environment, spending a lot of time that then, I know your shift doesn't always end when you think it's going to end. The environment you work in and the colleagues that you work with are very important to the success of the service.
Yeah, and I think for myself, for Megan and the other deputies as a leadership team, what I've seen is that my soundbite would be that leadership without empathy isn't leadership, it's management. And then actually, by being empathetic towards your colleagues, understanding what makes them work and fostering that environment, whether it's through the right training, reflective practices, is that actually we're in a really, really strong position to be able to help those staff through difficult moments. Because by being empathetic, that's more often that's what staff want. It's not about having all the answers, but it's about being able to, much like we do with the young people, it's about being able to provide that listening ear in times where it's been difficult, it's been a difficult shift. And it's about knowing that staff can come to you, they can trust you, that you're going to look out for them. And I suppose, like I said, that's my soundbite, is that you've got to lead with empathy. I think we're really conscious of that as a leadership team, that we have to look out for staff as much as we do the young people, because ultimately they're on the front line delivering that care to young people. If we don't look after them, well, the whole system falls apart.
The wheels doesn't turn.
Yeah, exactly.
So just coming over to sort of Imagine Our World and Nugent's strategic plan about together providing a lifelong pathway of support for our most vulnerable people, you know, and children in this case. Where do you think that will link with this, you know, trauma-informed practice, sexual exploitation? Because they are going to leave Marydale at some point. What tools do you give them, and what will the Imagine Our World pathway do to support, you know, young people who've been criminally or sexually exploited?
Yeah. So I think in terms of making sure the homes are ready, the next steps, where they move on to, they're having a full understanding of that child's journey, the progress they have made, what has worked well for them, what are their aspirations and hopes, and what skills have they already got to get there, if that makes sense, what they need to work on next. In terms of the like wider Nugent, I think the leadership, whether that be from yourself, the executive office, everything, the whole leadership in Nugent always like embodies that trauma-informed care in terms of our well-being as well. So even when we do our energy quadrant or things like that, we're always mindful of where we at to receive this information. Can we deliver this service? You know what I mean? So I think just even being conscious of those factors shows how conscious Nugent is about providing that right trauma-informed care, if that makes sense. And then the kids themselves, it's all about giving them the skills to cope outside of Marydale, because somewhat Marydale restricts some of the potential of risk, but we always fall into the scary bit of if they go out, do they have the right skills? And it's letting them know who they can be outside of crime, or that they're not necessarily victims or survivors of their experiences, and they're empowered to do whatever they truly wish to achieve, and giving them that sense of purpose and belonging and a new identity so they can go on and do the amazing things we know they can do.
And I suppose that pathway and being able to still be involved with adults that they've built up a trusting relationship with is pivotal really to that success.
Yeah, because very often they've not had them before, or like consistent caregivers, or just people they know where they're from through thick and thin. And it's like very often people come and just knock on the door and be like, I'm here, I've got my own kids and I've done this with my life and I can't thank you enough for this, that and the other, because they know how instrumental that turning point was. And for them to be able to be with us and then an open provision and going to adults, we're just a cornerstone for their whole life to know we've always got them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the vision for Imagine Our World came out of a really sad story of a young girl who had left our children's provision and didn't have any contact with Nugent colleagues afterwards. Got a place at Hubert College. Actually, a good move on accommodation, which isn't always the case.
Yeah.
But was socially isolated, resulted in her taking her own life. And I Imagine Our World is born from that tragedy about actually why can't we provide support through people's lives when they need it?
Yeah.
We all have humps and bumps in our life, that we have good family and friends that will support us. So for us to be that constant in somebody's life is critical, I think, to the success.
Yeah.
So social isolation is awful, isn't it? Is terrible.
Yeah.
And that's what the pathway does really well, isn't it? It's part of the trauma-informed model is to not re-traumatise young people. And by providing that consistency of care throughout their journey, whether it be into adult services, whatever it is they transition to go on to need, is that by having those trusted adults who they've built up relationships with and being in and around Nugent and its services prevents that re-traumatisation of having to explain your story to everybody, having to, to go through your experiences and relive that trauma, which does so much damage. The pathway sort of bridges over that really well.
Yeah, and I think it stops people falling into being criminally or sexually exploited again, because I think when you've got no choice, or it feels like you've got no choice but to make a poor choice, and, I talk about where someone borrows a tenner off the wrong person, and that tenner's £1,000 tomorrow. Well, if I didn't have a tenner, I'm not going to have £1,000. And then these people start getting you to do either criminally or sexual exploitation. And, I want to provide choice for people to make good, better choices.
Yeah.
So they don't feel like the only choice they've got is the poor choice.
Yeah. I think that's something our pathway from secure to open does really well, because, as I say, I know secures are more, it's not a real environment, is it? And when I go back into open, will I still be able to apply these skills? And we have to give these children who are seen as the very top peak of children who need support a chance. A lot of these kids are just say, well, there's too much risk, there's too much this, that and the other, when other children who need to be shown that no matter what, we're going to be here for you, and you have got the skills. There's a different alternative to going back to what you've learnt before.
Yeah,
because it's so easy to fall straight back into it.
And children that are in Marydale Lodge are the top 1% of children in this country, so that's a very small proportion, and for those of you who haven't watched the Marydale podcast with Megan and I, these two podcasts will feature well together. So just talk about the types of what secure home feels like compared to an open, and that's a huge step.
Yeah.
From a secure home to an open children's home.
It is, isn't it? Like in secure children's homes, everything is kind of supported around you, and it gives you an environment in which you can learn and grow within a certain parameters, if that makes sense. So everything is safely assessed, and
it's regimented, it's done for them. It's
a good structure for consistency when children have lacked it completely.
A routine is good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where you've
come from chaos. Yeah, so that consistency and safety, we see a lot of children really enjoy that environment because it's actually predictable, and unpredictability sometimes drives threat, doesn't it? And just coping and surviving, whereas when you've got predictable, consistent care, you can actually enjoy the care that you're getting. But that can look like as you say, set routines, set times, school and health are all in one building, so we meet everybody's needs for that time period. It should almost be like a stopgap in your life, and then you move over to our open homes where it is again choices. You're going out, you might have the option of free time in the community, you might have access to money in your hand, or having phones, which you don't have in Marydale. So phones in Marydale are landlines, aren't they? Yeah. They're not mobile phones where everyone's on Snapchat and things like that. So all them temptations almost flood back when you come into
social media wouldn't feature in Marydale for young people.
Yeah, no social media. We've got limited internet access, haven't we? And then contact is supervised and things like that. So it's a real safety net for kids, but can also be very daunting when you leave that again, because you think, oh, I've managed, I've coped, I've settled, now I'm here, and now I have to go back into the big bad world. What do I do? And I think, as you say, having that pathway to people, and they know, oh, Nugent have got me, they know my story, they know what I have done before. They're not just going to dislike me because I've done this before. I don't have to prove myself to anyone. I can just be the kid that they know I have been.
And they'll, with that sort of traffic light system, we'll know what works, what doesn't work, with that relationship.
Yeah.
Just, what would you like to see change at local and government level to help with sexual and criminal exploitation? Big question.
Well, we discussed it on the way here, and one thing that I'm really passionate about, that I'd like to see certainly at a national level, is for the government to reflect and restrict privatisation of open residential children's homes. I think the profiteering in children's residential care enables a really, really degradation of the care of young people, because I think it's grim that young people are profited off the back on by private providers. And certainly one thing that I'd like to see is for the government to review that, so that people like ourselves and Nugent and the voluntary sector are the providers that are able to give children those homes.
Yeah, and I think for myself at like a community level, the actual funding for this kind of work has been so restricted. I think community-based projects, there has to be something for these kids as an alternative. If there is nothing else to do, boredom creates mischief, and it's everywhere. It's so accessible. Anyone can get drawn into these, exploit these situations. There needs to be something more constructive where these kids can give back. Like even when I was a kid last week, we were always together, or there was like a group, or there was something. Whereas now it's like dispersal orders. You can't be there. What are we doing then? There needs to be something from the community to understand how children get into it, and what the effects are. It's even like liaising with the local authorities, designated safeguard lead. They talk about the disparity in training, understanding what trauma-informed care is throughout professions who all see children. So, for example, teachers don't have the same training as we would require in terms of trauma-informed care, but why? We're all looking for the same signs. So how are we not?
Yeah, and I think, I was at the Labour conference last week and attended a session called Lost Boys. And it really hit home actually about how many boys, are falling through these gaps in terms of in fatherless relationships, in families. There's very few male teachers in primary education. There's no youth clubs anymore. They've all been shut. And, youth clubs, were a place where people could talk and feel safe. So I'd like to see much more activities, educational reform in terms of what curriculum looks like in secondary education compared to the world of work.
Yeah.
Because that's a big step. I'm only found out last week, but really pleased that, and this will be a controversial statement, but I'm going to say it anyway, that Maths and English isn't compulsory for apprenticeships, because that is putting off people going down their apprenticeship route. So they end up dropping out of college because they don't think they can get the Maths and English, so it not being compulsory. And as I say, I think for some that will be controversial, but I think that's really critical to people's world of work and employability, because employability stops being exploited.
Yeah, exactly. When you feel, as you say, if you've not got a choice, the one that's always there is the poor one.
Yeah,
the poor choice, and it's an easy revenue, isn't it, to get money?
Which I was thinking about tonight.
Yeah,
we all the trainers, or I need something to eat.
Yeah.
I think our 5 themes for Imagine Our World accommodations are somewhere safe.
Yeah.
And I think that the accommodation I is with Marydale, when they first arrive, they sleep for days, don't they? Because they feel safe.
Yeah.
And they feel they can sleep without one eye open on the door. Poverty in its widest sense, people with hygiene products, haven't got a toothbrush, shower gel, we know, Jacob, what you think of your hair. Can you imagine not having hair products?
Yeah.
It's not cheap. I making memories that children haven't licked an ice cream, so they don't know what to do when it's running all on their hands.
Yeah.
Things that we just take for granted. Haven't been to the cinema, let alone the theatre.
Yeah.
The beach, to a caravan holiday. Haven't eaten in a restaurant. The fast food they might be used to, but haven't eaten in a restaurant. So that's sort of making memories. So I think those experiences, but those 5 themes mean that people have a chance to have a much more fulfilling life.
Yeah. And I think that's what having that holistic view of care is what all our homes do, all our branches of Nugent do. Without having all of them, it will crumble a little bit. So I think our awareness and making sure we hit every element of life like that is essential to keep it going, keep the trajectory going, keep development going. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's so important, because it's very easy for us as professionals to work in our own little silos, whether it's police, education, health, social care, and it's very easy for us all to think, well, I've done my bit, but actually we've all got a duty to see through and safeguard young people. And like it says, that if we're all just doing our little bit but not thinking beyond that, then that's where the whole system falls down.
Yeah, and I think we're in a unique opportunity that we do children's and adult homes and support, people through life. So I don't think there's many organisations that have that opportunity. So I think with our partners, we will be able to provide that lifelong support. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to hear more about Imagine Our World, then go to the link on our website, and I look forward to catching up with you on future podcasts. Thank you.